Thank you. The next item of business is a debate on motion 13759 in the name of Gillian Martin on Scottish Government priorities tackling the climate emergency. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate. Please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Minister Gillian Martin to speak to and to move the motion. Up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister has confirmed that tackling the climate crisis is one of his top priorities for the Government, alongside eradicating child poverty, growing the economy and improving public services. And that commitment to climate change, both here and internationally, has long been at the heart of this Government. Indeed, in Scotland, we're among the first to take bold, early action, and we continue to lead globally in responding to the climate emergency. The twin crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss are clearly with us now, and tackling them is the collective fight of all of us in our lifetime, given that they are perhaps the single greatest long-term threat that we face globally. The motion today calls on this chamber to recommit itself to the undeniable imperative for action. The science and evidence is not only clear about the scale and the urgency of climate change, but the importance of being part of international action, as well as pushing forward domestically. Our domestic and international aspirations come together in an unwavering commitment to reach net zero emissions by 2045. That's both 5 years ahead of the UK and still one of the most ambitious targets in the world. But a just transition to net zero by 2045 will require genuine transformational action and investment across our economy and society, with significant changes in sectors such as energy, heat, buildings, transport and agriculture. And just as this Parliament set that high ambition for 2045, it's essential that we come together to reaffirm that ambition and the action needed to meet that ambition. All too often it's been the case that with modest measures the Scottish Government has brought forward not been supported, and I hope that this can be a point at which to reset, because we do need action, not just talk. I want to talk about our role in addressing the global challenge of climate change. In 2012, we were the first government to establish a climate justice fund, solely committed to supporting the most climate vulnerable communities in the global south, to build resilience to the unavoidable impacts of climate change. We were the first global North government to commit finance explicitly to addressing loss and damage, and have helped to galvanise global ambition with over $750 million now committed worldwide. Recent programmes have included support for the urban dimension of loss and damage, supporting households in Malawi following the devastation of Tropical Storm Freddy, and piloting an innovative approach across a loss and damage window with Scotland's Humanitarian Emergency Fund. Those have not only been projects critical to supporting those countries, but actions focused on helping individuals and communities with the impact of climate change, a hallmark of our approach domestically as well as internationally. And as European co-chair of the European Under-2 Coalition, we've driven international cooperation to further collective climate action. I'm also very pleased to announce today that Scotland will be taking over the presidency of the Regions 4 Development Network, a network of states, regions and devolved governments focusing on tackling the twin crisis of climate and biodiversity and advancing sustainable development. Our international role is rooted in what we have done domestically and where we can point to real progress. We are now exactly halfway to net zero, with Scotland achieving its largest reduction in emissions of any nature in the UK between 1990 and 2022. And we've decarbonised faster than the average of the EU 27 countries. That's reflected in the action we're taking. For example, we have the most comprehensive network of electric vehicle public charging points per head of population in the UK outside of London. We're now supporting low emission zones to bring clean air to Scotland's cities and help protect public health. We have some of the most generous grants and loans in the UK to encourage the switch to cleaner forms of heating and to make energy efficiency improvements. And this, I will do.
Sarah Boyack.
It's actually not possible to get solar panel funding in Scotland, and it still is south of the border. So it's not the most generous system, and actually we need to do way more to encourage and support people to decarbonise their homes. Don't you agree?
Through the chair, please,
so,
Minister.
Ms Boyack and I have had an exchange on this very point just very recently about why we are actually focusing the funding that we do have available to us to actually encouraging the switch from actual emitting and polluting heating systems. That could mean the switch between a gas boiler and a heat pump. And we have had to make some tough decisions with regard to where we focus that money. Now, however, if there's a new UK government comes in that wants to give us more by way of consequentials in this area, we would relook at that policy. More than 75% of all tree planting in the UK in recent years has been in Scotland. And the Circular Economy Bill, which will shortly complete its parliamentary process, the Circular Economy Bill, which will shortly complete its parliamentary process, will support Scotland's transition to a zero-waste and circular economy, significantly increasing reuse and recycling rates, modernise and improve waste and recycling services, and build on a range of transformational measures we are already putting in place, including banning problematic single-use plastic items, reforming extended producer responsibility for packaging, and our ongoing £70 million investment in local authority recycling infrastructure.
Edward Mountain.
And I thank the Minister for giving way on that point. I had to intervene on the issue of tree planting. Of course, we've hardly met our tree planting targets in the last 6 years. I think we're about 20,000 hectares behind of where we should be. And this year we put through 10 million trees on the scrap heap because we cut the planting grants. Is the government proud of that? Or are they just going to say we're planting more trees, but ignoring the fact that they can't reach their targets and are scrapping trees?
Minister.
Key to us delivering on the ambitious targets that we put in place is having the capital funding that allows us to fund all those programmes. I said that to Ms Boyack. I'm saying that to Mr Mountain as well. If we want to be a front runner in all these areas, we have to understand that they have to be funded. And when you have cuts to your capital budget, or you have inflationary rises that you did not have any hand in, it is very difficult to meet those commitments. Now, you'll notice in my speech that I make the point there has to be investment and funding against all of these actions. Our commitment to net zero will help boost our economic... I'm taking too many interventions already. Scotland's economy grew by 67% in real terms between 1990 and 2022, at the same time as we cut our greenhouse gas emissions in half, demonstrating that tackling climate change and growing our economy absolutely go hand in hand. We want to combine Scotland's vibrant entrepreneurial nation, world-leading academic and research institution, valuable natural resources and our businesses and communities in a shared agenda to deliver net zero. And as part of this, we will help businesses and investors through development and delivery of our green industrial strategy, so that the people of Scotland can share in the enormous economic opportunities of the global transition to net zero. One of the key areas in which we are seizing these opportunities is in our vision for Scotland to become a renewables powerhouse that the people of Scotland see the benefit from. In 2022, 87.9% of electricity generation came from zero or low-carbon sources. This has already brought huge benefits to Scotland in terms of economic growth, export opportunities and well-paid skilled jobs. And that was evidenced by the recent significant investments by Sumitomo at Nigg and Haventus at Ardersier. ScotWind is absolutely central to this ambition. As the world's largest commercial round for floating offshore wind, it's put Scotland at the forefront of offshore wind development globally. We see huge potential for Scotland in hydrogen production as well. There's a great demand for green hydrogen, and Scotland is very well placed to develop a significant hydrogen sector, which will create many jobs and income for the nation as a whole, whether using hydrogen domestically or exporting it to other countries. And similarly, our approach to net zero will also ensure support for our commitment to ending child poverty. For example, if you look at our policy of making public transport more accessible and affordable, it's a key part of this approach. And our Scotland-wide bus schemes offer free travel to a larger percentage of the population than anywhere else in the UK. And our ScotRail's peak fares removal pilot is a first in the UK. I'll take Mr Rowley.
Alec Riley.
Certainly the lower fares or free fares for under 22s is welcomed. But the reality is you can have a bus pass, but if you can't get a bus, and our bus services in a lot of communities is in utter chaos. So do you accept we need to actually look at the total bus provision?
Through the chair, please, Minister.
Yeah. There's been hundreds of millions of pounds put into the bus network. However, as a rural MSP, I absolutely recognise it's perhaps actually in constituencies like mine where we have a situation long after the deregulation of bus services that there has been certainly a lot of action needed from successive governments in putting more investment into particularly rural networks, and that's what we're committed to do. We also have a range of policy interventions which are designed to decrease fuel poverty, and we continue to press for reform in the reserved areas that affect this at source. And moreover, the Just Transition plans are in development for transport, agriculture and land reform, buildings and construction, as well as the site-specific plan for Grangemouth, demonstrating this commitment in action. We're also strengthening Scotland's resilience to the impacts of climate change, and we'll set out how we're doing this with the publication of our Scottish National Adaptation Plan later this year, and are consulting on a new national flood resilience strategy right now. Given the constraints of devolution, we cannot do this alone. Scotland lacks the full range of levers to deal with the long-term challenges in the way that others can. But we also want to make the point that the UK needs to invest significantly in climate action if both Scotland and the UK are to meet both their targets on net zero. One of us can't do it without the other. The impact of the former UK government's completely wrong-headed real terms cut to Scotland's capital funding of almost 9% over 5 years is having an impact on what we do.
Minister,
and we've heard
could you please bring your remarks
today.
to a close, please?
I will close with my remarks. Presiding Officer, I hope that Parliament recognises the urgency of tackling the twin crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss, as the science and the imperative to be part of global action demands. The Government remains fully committed to rising to the challenge, reaping the economic benefits of a just and fair transition to net zero. I move the motion in my name.
Thank you.